if you're interested in retiring. I know you're going to find this video to be particularly helpful. I curated it to give you exposure to 5 different topics that I think are foundational as you think about retiring. And it's from my library of over 400 videos here on YouTube. And these are some of my most popular videos. So let's jump in and get going. Did you know that the average 60-year-old has less than 1,000 weeks of healthy, active time to look forward to? And that's if we're lucky. The vast majority of us, particularly men, are not going to have that much time. So let that sink in. And in today's video, if that stat isn't enough, I'm going to share with you 5 reasons we should all retire well before we're age 65. And if you stay to the end, I'm going to let you inside of the tent from the financial advisor's corner and share with you 3 secrets that most people don't know. So stick around to the end. Let's go for a walk and talk. You know, the first one is the first reason I've already shared. The second reason that you should retire well before you're age 65 is, you know, we're humans and we're adaptable. And nothing's going to go according to plan. I can, you know, the SEC says, you know, you can't guarantee anything, but I can guarantee one thing, and that is things are not going to go according to your plan. You're going to have years that you do better, and you're going to have years that you do worse. And you know, we're adaptable. And the other thing is we tend to overstate how much money we're going to be spending in retirement. Because most people look at it as an even amount of money every year. And the reality is, and you've probably heard this before, you have your go-go years where, you know, your health is the best, you're the most active, you have the most energy, and you're doing a lot of things. Those are called your go-go years. And then you have your slow-go years, you know, when you've done the traveling that you want to do, the things that were on your short list, you've gotten done. And there's still lots to do, but maybe you don't have, if you'll let me be a little uncouth, you don't have as much piss and vinegar as the first couple of years that you retired, right? This now becomes your new reality. You lose that sense of urgency to go out there and get it done. And I hope you never do lose that sense of urgency and that sense of curiosity and appetite for adventure. But the reality is most of us will. Not entirely, but things will slow down. So then you have your slow go years, and then you have your no go years. And the reality is it tends to be like a barbell. You have your expenses fairly high the first, you know, third of your retirement. Then your expenses tend to go down and you're happy to stay at home and hang out with your adult children and play with your grandkids, which is all wonderful stuff. But it's not that expensive, right? And then you have your no-go years, and what none of us really know, you know, obviously here in the United States, healthcare can be expensive. And we don't know what those healthcare costs are going to be. But I can tell you Fidelity did a study, and they say that the average married couple is going to spend over $300,000 for healthcare costs after they retire. But we don't know where that's going to be. So it's kind of a barbell, right? A fair amount of money early, then less money, and then a fair amount of money at the end if you have a complicated healthcare situation. So because we don't have certainty on that, on what our cash flow needs are, a lot of people tend to overstate those. And, you know, it'd be a shame to postpone retiring because you wanted a certain cash flow number, and then you find out, you know what, I really didn't need that. And I could have retired earlier. Okay, so that's the second one. The third one is you're probably never going to get more joy from your time than you do when you first retire, just because you're healthier, you have more energy. So your dollar is going to be able to buy you more fun, more adventures, more excitement than later in life. It doesn't mean that your satisfaction in life is going to go down. In fact, multiple studies have shown that. You know, I'm in my late 50s and I'm about to start, you know, going up in satisfaction. And I can already see that happening, right? The responsibilities of paying off my mortgage, the responsibilities of saving for my kids' college education, the responsibility of saving for retirement, all of that weight has been lifted off of my shoulders, and I got to tell you, it feels wonderful. But what we're going to find is we're getting our money can buy us more joy now. There's a book that I've mentioned before called Die with Zero by Bill Perkins. And he does an excellent job of talking about this. So I highly recommend that book. It's one of the 5 seminal books. If you'd like me to do a video on kind of the 5 books I think everybody needs to read as they're thinking about retiring, let me know in the comments. And speaking of which, if you're enjoying this video, as the kids say, thumbs for likes, hit the like button for me, and subs for love. If you like my channel, if you like my videos, consider subscribing, and do leave me a comment. That's kind of the currency that drives me on my video. So unfortunately, there's a steep decline in the joy that your money can bring you as we get older. So that's another reason to retire much sooner than 65. Okay, and one of the big obstacles that people face, and one of the reasons that people continue working past 55, past 60, past 65, past 70, is they don't know what else they would do other than working. And what I can tell you is that is a solvable problem. You will figure that out. And if you want help on figuring that out, there's another book I'll recommend called Strength to Strength by Arthur Brooks. And he really talks about how we transition over our lives from one area of passion, one area of strength to the next one. And of course, this one into retirement is a big transition, right? It's not just a new job, it's a big transition. And it's not unlike what college students face when they leave the college environment, right? For, most college kids graduate when they're 20 to 22. It's what they've done their whole life, right? They've either been a child at home or they've been a student. And now all of a sudden they're going out into the big scary world and learning to be an adult. And in fact, that contentment, that satisfaction with life curve that I was telling you about, I was really surprised when I saw this. It kind of bottoms out in your 20s. And I got to tell you, I had a great time in my 20s. So I'm not sure what that's about, but I think it's just that transition. Who am I supposed to be when I grow up? And, how am I ever going to get a job I remember thinking this, how am I ever going to get a job that's going to pay for a house and pay for my family and save for a retirement? When you're making minimum wage, it's really easy to do the math and say, I can't survive on this, right? I mean, I could if I had to, but how am I ever going to buy a house and things like that? And it's easy to just kind of draw that line up and to the right and just assume that it's always going to be that way. But that's the satisfaction side of things. And just like college kids figure it out, we're going to figure it out too. And the sooner you start doing your homework on that and reading books like Die with Zero and Strength to Strength, the better off that you're going to be. Okay, let's keep going. The other thing people worry about is there's always something to worry about, right? The saying in my industry is Wall Street climbs a wall of worry. There's always something to worry about. I mean, as I record this, yet again, we're having another debt ceiling crisis. It didn't have to be a crisis, but it looks like it's going to be. So there's always something to worry about. There's political unrest. The pandemic obviously was a huge thing to worry about. There's always something to worry about. But as many things as there are to worry about, there's also things that we don't know about that's going to have a positive development on society. For instance, and this is controversial, this whole AI movement that's taking place. And I think it's a big transition for humans. And I do think people are going to have to reskill yet again because of this. But if you're retiring, what you want in your investments is companies that can do things better, faster, cheaper. And companies that can do that tend to, over time, be valued more highly by Wall Street. And I think AI is one of those game changers, just like the internet was. So be careful. I'm not saying to invest in AI. What I'm saying is AI is going to be a tool to allow companies to do things better, faster, cheaper. Just like the internet, I think, has done that. So there's always plenty of things to worry about, but there's also things that we don't know on the positive side that are going to happen. And net, I think the positives outweigh the negatives. And I know the older we get, it's harder for that to feel that in your core. But think about what's at risk if you don't have an optimistic viewpoint. You don't want to be naive about it, but if you're overly worried, you could give up the best years of your life because you're worried. Gee, I needed, and yet let's say your number was $2 million, and you got there, and you said, okay, now I want a buffer, so I want to have $3 million. Okay, that's a big buffer, but okay. And you get to 3 million, and you say, oh, I'm so worried about what's going on. The sequence of return risk and all these other things, and so you keep working. Well, you're giving up. Money is a tool to let you live your best life, and unfortunately, you're giving that up. Okay, I promised to give you some secrets, let you inside the tent of a financial advisor's life. But before I do that, I'm going to ask you yet again, if you're enjoying this video, hit the like button for me. And if you like my videos, think about subscribing. Okay, let's keep going. Secret number one. Don't tell anyone this, but financial advisors are super conservative by nature, right? We want our clients to outperform their plan. So we're more conservative. I think that's a good thing, right? You'd rather tell your clients, you can expect to spend, I'm just making up a number, $80,000 a year in retirement, and they find out they can spend $90,000. Everybody's happy with that scenario, but we are conservative by nature. One of the tools that we use, this is a secret number two. Again, don't tell anybody. This is just between us. Whatever you do, don't share my videos with your friends, because I don't want anybody but the two of us to know these secrets. But there's a tool called Monte Carlo simulation, and it's a really powerful tool. It essentially is a very sophisticated tool that gives you what I consider to be a good feel for the probability you have of never running out of money. Right? It's an important tool. It's a core tool. If your financial advisor is not using it, you should ask them to. If you're not using a financial advisor, first off, I think you should seriously consider using a fee-only financial advisor. And at a minimum, hire somebody to run a Monte Carlo simulation. You don't want to think that you're okay. You want to know that you're okay. But getting back to the subject, Monte Carlo simulations, as a financial advisor, I want my clients to have a 95% plus probability of success, right? Meaning there's a 5% chance that things are going to be worse than planned. And of course, you got to take these numbers with a grain of salt. I think it's fair to say there's a very small chance things are going to be worse than what we're planning on. I think that's fair to say. But 95% probability is a big probability, and it takes a fair amount of money to go from an 80% probability of success to a 95% probability of success. And, for me personally, 90% probability of success is probably good enough for me. But I think for a lot of people, I'm not saying that you do this, but look at what you have to trade off to go from 80% probability of success to 90% probability of success. And if you're an adaptable person that says, I'm planning on, I'm just going to stick with this number, spending $80,000 a year, but you know what? I can live a really nice life on $65,000 a year, or I don't have to take a inflation adjustment every year that increases my cash flow to keep my purchasing power. In the years when the market's down, maybe I won't take an inflation adjustment, stuff like that. We are adaptable. And if you do that, you can likely get to your goal of retiring sooner, much earlier. So that's secret number two. And finally, secret number three is have a conversation. This sounds bizarre, but I really think you can do it. Put on your 80-year-old hat. And let's say you're 50 years old. I'm going to be 59 in a couple weeks. So 59-year-old Azul would have a conversation with 80-year-old Azul. And you know what 80-year-old Azul would say to younger Azul? say, carpe diem, carpe diem, what Robin Williams said in that movie Dead Poets Society. Live life to the fullest. Live life to the fullest. And I suspect if you have a conversation with your 80-year-old self, they're going to be whispering back to you, live life to your fullest. Enjoy it all. We only get one life. What net worth do you need to have in America to be considered part of the upper, the middle, or the lower class? Let's go for a walk and talk about this. So real quickly, what is net worth? Net worth is just simply the value of your assets minus any liabilities that you might have. So quick and easy example, if your only asset was a home, and it was worth $300,000 and you had a $200,000 mortgage on it, you would take the value of your assets, which is $300,000, subtract the value of your debt, which is $200,000, and you would have a net worth of $100,000. So I hope that makes sense. Also, we're going to talk here about median numbers, which is important as opposed to average. One or two people with a lot of money could really skew averages, but it won't skew median, because median is half the people have more, half the people have less. So just to cut to the chase, the Federal Reserve has data of all households. The median household net worth in 2021 is $120,000. Now, what we're going to do in today's video is we're going to break that down into 5 different sections, 5 quintiles. And we're going to talk about the lowest 20%, the lower middle, the middle, and then the upper middle, and then also the wealthy category. And to go there, I need to switch sources. We're going to go to the U.S. Census. So in the lowest 20%, the median household net worth is just over $6,000. And that doesn't surprise me. That rings true because it's not much money at all, right? It's basically you have enough to survive a surprise car repair, but not a whole lot more than that. So that lower 20% is really living paycheck to paycheck. There's not much savings at all. But if you're in that category, you just do the very best that you can. And if you've got $6,000 in net worth, if you've got a couple $1,000s in the bank, you're doing what you can. Just keep doing that. If to the extent you can, try to get some additional education and skills. So hopefully you can build out of that and get a higher paying job on that. And if there's topics that folks in that category would like me to talk about, please leave a comment. I'd be happy to focus a couple videos on some things to think about. I come from a family in a similar situation. Neither of my parents probably made more than 3 times minimum wage their whole life, probably closer to 2 times minimum wage. And yet they were able to raise my brother and sister and I. And I was fortunate. I got a scholarship from the military to go to college. But I've got a heart for helping folks in that category. I think all of America does. So if there's anything I can do, any videos, leave me a comment. I'd love to hear what topics would be helpful. The lower middle is just over $40,000. So there's a big jump there, right? And when you just have enough to pay your bills, it doesn't surprise me that there's a big jump when you get to the group that hopefully, has a little bit more to pay the bills. I'll give you a nice view of the sunset here. And so the lower middle is just over $40,000. That's a nice jump. It's $43,760. So the middle of the middle class has another nice jump. And their median household net worth is just over $100,000. So $104,700. And then the upper middle class has just over $200,000 of median household net worth, $201,800. So, these are nice jumps. And you can see, as I think about it, the numbers basically double. The lowest 20%, close to 5,000, close to zero, right? And I don't mean that in a derogatory sense. Folks are doing the best that they can, but then the lower middle goes to 45,000, then the middle basically doubles to 100,000, then the upper, which is 104,700, then the upper middle doubles again to basically 200,000 from a little over 100,000. And they have $201,800. And then the wealthy group actually triples the group above them, right? Once you have more than enough. you can start saving money, although it doesn't happen automatically. Let me give you the number first, and I'll come back to that thought. The wealthy groups have $608,900. And so you can see it takes time to build that net worth, right? And it takes discipline. And by discipline, what I mean is, those folks that are in the upper quintile, that number could and probably should be even higher than that. Again, it's not judgment. You do you, but, I'm a big fan of saving. I'm a big fan of investing and building that retirement account. So if you can save more, always do. And in that wealthy group, I want to share a stat. Over half of the people that make $100,000 a year don't save a dime. Now, some folks have good reasons for that, but if you're making $100,000 a year, really do everything you can to try to start saving, because you've got a nice engine there for building your net worth, for preparing for retirement. So I encourage you to take advantage of that. Now, a lot of my viewers are 40 plus. A lot of my viewers are thinking about retiring soon or are retired. So what's the typical retiree's net worth? The typical retiree's net worth in 2021 is $250,000. So I hope this information has been helpful. I want to close with some foundational pieces. And really, as you're thinking about building up your net worth, you've heard me say it before, I think job number one is to have an emergency fund, at least 3 months, hopefully closer to 6 months, maybe even as much as a year, if you can save that much. And the biggest reason is, right, if something bad happens, you get an unexpected medical bill, an unexpected car bill, car repair, you have money to pay it. But really where it pays off in spades, if you happen to lose your job, if you have an emergency fund, you have time to find the job that's the right match for you. So you don't have to take that first job that comes along. And I think that is savings spent at its best, right? To help you build a life where you can thrive. And related to that, savings at its best, investment at its best, is investing in yourself. I think the best investment any of us can make is the investment to learn new skills that might allow us to make more money, and even more importantly, will allow us to be in a career that we find meaningful and puts joy in our heart. I think that's really priceless. So again, the fundamentals are you want to have an emergency fund, at least 3 months, hopefully more. Of course, you need to spend, you hear me say this many times, you need to spend less than you earn. And then I encourage you to invest in yourself. Today, I'm going to share with you 4 important, but unfortunately uncomfortable rules about retirement. And I'm going to save the most important one to last. So be sure to watch until then. The first one is the famous 4% rule, which gives you a guideline as to whether or not you have enough money to retire. That rule is based on a fairly volatile portfolio. When Benson did his study, it was based on portfolios anywhere from 50% exposure to stocks to 70% exposure to stocks. And certainly as you get closer to a 70% stock portfolio, that's not a low risk portfolio. So there's a fair amount of volatility. So buckle up and be ready for that. The second one's related to that, which is, unfortunately, there is no bulletproof portfolio, right? There's portfolios that have worked in the past and should work in the future, but it doesn't mean that there's not going to be bumps in the road and there's not going to be surprises, right? The SEC has a guideline where we've all heard this in ads. Past performance is not indicative of future performance. And there's a reason the SEC wants people to put that in their ads, because it's very true, right? What moves markets are things that we can't think about ahead of time. There's surprises at some level. Some of them are huge surprises, like the pandemic certainly was for me a huge surprise. Like the financial crisis in 2007, 2008, less of a surprise for me, but still a surprise. Black Friday, for those of us older to remember, 1987, when the market moved 20% in one day. These are surprises that we don't expect to happen, and that's why they move the market. So just because something's worked in the past doesn't mean it's going to work in the future. And the third uncomfortable truth is there are some risks that are worth taking that are going to make you uncomfortable. And I think the best example of that is if you have a financial plan put together professionally, it's likely, or even if you do it on the internet, it's likely going to give you a likelihood of success. And one of the things you'll notice is none of those plans will ever say it's 100% likely to succeed, right? I think you want to be in the 90% range. For some people, it might be okay to even be in a little bit less than 90%. But I think the price that you pay, certainly when you're at 95% likely of succeeding, the uncomfortable truth is what you have to give up in order to go from 95% likelihood of succeeding to 99% is probably not a price that you want to pay. It's just too great of a price. What it means is you're going to have to keep working. You're going to have to save more money. You're going to have a more volatile portfolio than you want. And or you're going to spend less money in retirement. And frankly, I just don't think any of those are worth it, right? These plans are not written in stone, right? You don't know when you're going to die. You don't know what tax rates are going to be, even for when you file your taxes next year for this calendar year. So how the heck are we supposed to know what it's going to be in 20 years and 30 years, et cetera? So I think that's a risk worth taking, but it is going to make you uncomfortable. So now on to what I consider to be the most important uncomfortable truth. And that is, if you're 60 years old, and most of us watching these videos are either 60 or pretty close to 60. And, retirement's on the horizon. That's why we're watching videos like this. But if you're 60 years old, the uncomfortable truth is you likely have less than 1,000 weeks remaining of healthy, active time. Let that sink in for a second. 1,000 weeks. That's not a lot of time, right? So we want to make sure that we're making the most of it. And I'm sorry to put this uncomfortable truth on your plate, but better you think about it now and you're intentional in how you spend your time and you just go after it, right? When we were younger, we could put things off for longer and longer. But as we get older, the cost of doing that is much higher because we just don't have as much time left. Would you like to be wealthy? Of course, we'd all like to be wealthy. I've been fortunate. I've gotten to know many, many people worth millions of dollars, many people worth tens of millions of dollars, and even a few billionaires. And through that, I've picked up a couple valuable secrets from them. And today I want to share that with you. So let's go for a walk and talk about who wants to be a billionaire, or better yet, what the secrets are of the people that have gotten there. And I think one of the first secrets is, they seem to care less about buying things to impress other people, right? They're happy to spend money on things that they think are going to improve themselves as people, that are going to improve the lives of their kids, better educations, maybe help their kids out with a house payment, down payment, things like that. They're happy to spend money on things that are going to earn them money. Invest in a company, invest in equities, invest in bonds, stocks, things like that. But they're less caught up with impressing their neighbors. And it's almost like the cool kid in high school, right? I was never the cool kid in high school. I was kind of in the second ring of friends outside looking in a little bit. So occasionally, I'd buy the right tennis shoes or, the right shirt or whatever was the fashion back in the 1980s when I was a kid. But you know what? Wealthy people are not buying fancy cars to impress you. You know what the number one car is of millionaires, according to the book, The Millionaire Next Door? It's Hondas and Toyotas, right? Cars that probably look a lot like you and I. And when we think of millionaires, that's not necessarily what we think of. We might be thinking, people driving Bentleys and Mercedes-Benz and things like that. But it turns out that's not the case. So they don't spend money to impress. In fact, if you stay to the end, I'm going to share with you one of the world's richest people, what kind of house this individual lives in. So be sure to stay to the end. Another secret is, really having an understanding of what money is. When you're struggling to get by, when you're first starting off in life, money is just survival, right? Money is a way to pay your bills. And then as you kind of get past that, then money is a way to get access to some of the assets that you'd like to have, maybe a nicer car, maybe a house. And by having a good income, you can get debt, you can get a mortgage, and you can help get some of the material things that you'd like to have, both as an investment, but then also just from a comfort of life. But I think the one thing that I've noticed with wealthy people is they look at money differently. money is a tool to make money. Money is a tool to, buy some creature comforts, to make their life better, to continuously improve, as I said earlier. But it's also a way to make money. And they look at it that way. They look at, what can I buy? How can I invest my money in real estate, in stocks, in bonds, in other companies? How can they have their money working as hard as they can? And, the irony is, because they're looking at that, and they're investing their money, oftentimes, many times, wealthy people do not look like wealthy people. And the irony is, many people the people that do look wealthy, those tend to be people that, not always, but tend to be people that have using a lot of debt. They're not wealthy, but they want to look wealthy. So, the people that are wealthy don't look wealthy, and the people that want to be wealthy but aren't, and maybe are looking wealthy now, where they're spending tomorrow's dollars in order to look that way today. And I don't think that's a good way to do things. Wealthy people don't have to prove that they're wealthy. And I think trying to impress other people is really a negative. So, not only is it expensive to try to impress people, right? These brands, the things that signal wealth, tend to be really expensive. So they're expensive. And it can also create stress in your life, right? Figuring out how you're going to pay for all of this, managing the debt and having that type of debt load on you can really, really be a burden to people. And again, if you have money, you don't have anything to prove. And, there's a saying that wealth don't have to prove, excuse me, wealth don't have to prove nothing. And I think there's a lot of truth to that. So, if you want to be a millionaire, I think it's important to think poor, right? If you want to be rich, think poor, not necessarily poor, but just be cognizant of how you're investing your money. So, if you're doing everything that you can and you're still not saving as much money as you want, there's a couple things to think about. One is, can you get your savings greater than 10%? I think 10% is the minimum that people need to be saving in order to have a secure financial future. And unfortunately, I think you really need to be closer to 20%. So if you're at the 10% level, what can you do to get to the 20% level? And I think there's a couple things you can do. One, some that can be done more quickly than others. On the subject of doing it more quickly, what can you do to start saving more money? Really think through, what are your wants and what are your needs? So your needs obviously are things like your mortgage or your rent, your utility bill, your car to get to work, food, clothing, support for your kids, things like that. Those are your needs. But really think about things outside of that. Those are the wants. And we saw during COVID that, the average American went from saving like 5% to, it was the highest savings rate the United States, I believe, has ever seen, or it's been many, many decades. But it's like 20% during COVID. And why is that? Well, we couldn't go out to eat. There wasn't a lot of ways for us to spend money. And plus, many people had access to more money than they had in the past because of some of the government support programs. So, during COVID, I think a lot of us found out, what our needs are and what our wants are, because we just couldn't do the things that we wanted to do. So that tends to be a faster way to get there, is make this list of the wants and needs. And you can do anything for 30 days and see if you can live on those needs, and then bring in the wants based on the value, based on the joy that these other things bring to you. And then on the slower path, how do you get from 10% savings to 20% savings over time? There, I think there's a couple things you can do. Every time you get a promotion or you get a raise at work, half of that goes to your current self and half of that goes to your future self. So I think that, that's going to take time, right? It might be a couple years till you get a promotion. Hopefully you're getting a decent raise every year. And half of that's for current you, and you can spend that, and half of that you want to save. Now, at the beginning of the video, I promised to share with you what one of the wealthiest person in the world, what his house looks like. Let's talk about two people. One is Warren Buffett. And any guesses on what Warren Buffett paid for his house? Warren Buffett paid $31,000 for his house. Now, admittedly, in 1958, but he still lives in that same house. And it's not very big. I understand it's like 3,000 or 4,000 square feet. Plus, he lives in Omaha, so that's the housing market is less expensive there. And then another, I believe right now, the wealthiest person in the United States is Elon Musk. And many times, he's got a prefab building that he lives in the factory near one of his manufacturing facilities in Texas. So he works so many hours, he just has this prefabricated 800 square foot home that basically has a bedroom, a kitchen, a restroom, things like that. So these are definitely wealthy people looking and living like average people. And I think we all can learn a lot from it. 2 years ago, my wife and I sold our house that we raised our kids in and lived in for over 15 years. And since then, we have been extreme minimalists. If it's not absolutely necessary for survival, we don't buy it. I'm kidding. I am what I would call a comfortable minimalist sense, or a practical minimalist. My wife and I have found the joys of owning less and enjoying more opportunities and activities that don't cost a lot of money, and enjoying the freedom of owning fewer things. Let's go for a walk and I'll share a little over a half a dozen of the things we no longer buy that save us a lot of time, save us a lot of money, and you know what? We don't miss them at all. Let's go for a walk and talk about it. Okay, the first one, and what I call enemy number one, and I suspect it's enemy number one in a lot of households. And I'm a big fan of the company and the services, but Amazon is enemy number one when it comes to buying things that we don't need, right? I mean, we used to have cardboard boxes showing up at our house at least once a day, buying all kinds of stuff that we didn't need. And, you know, once the kids headed off to college and we no longer had the house, we had spent so much time decluttering our house and giving away stuff and selling some things and finding other people that could use the stuff we had bought. And it just made us realize, you know, how much of this stuff do we really need? So we're much more practical when we go on Amazon now. In fact, I try to get on Amazon, buy what I need, what I jumped on Amazon for, and get off as soon as I can. And you know what? The fewer cardboard boxes that arrive at my house, the happier I am. It's kind of the inverse Amazon correlation. So that's the first one. And be sure to stay to the end, because this is kind of going up. So it's going to become bigger and bigger items that have brought me and my wife more joy by not having to worry about these things, not having to take care of stuff. So let's keep going. Another thing we do instead of buying stuff is we spend quality time together. Both my wife and I, but also, you know, separately. We have our own separate lives. So, you know, and instead of maybe, buying something and, oh, here's the latest gizmo, you know, we'll go for a hike. I'm lucky I live in a ski town. So we'll go for a hike up in the mountains or a bike ride into town to get a bagel and a coffee. I find myself more and more, instead of going out for expensive dinners with my friends, you know, I really enjoy seeing my friends more often, seeing more friends, but just going out for coffee instead of dinner. In my town, restaurants are expensive. And you know, I think the entire United States is finding they have fewer employees. So the service, they just can't give the same level of service. So it ends up being a whole evening that you spend. And oftentimes it's a heck of a lot more fun to just sit across the table with a warm cup of coffee in your hand and catch up with your friend or spend time with your spouse. One of my kids lives in Seattle. Another thing my daughter and I and my wife and I and some friends and I enjoy doing is just taking a ferry ride. You know, they use ferries in Seattle and also in San Francisco almost like a lot of towns would use buses, to get from point A to point B. And, certainly in the Bay Area, boy, there's from downtown San Francisco. My oldest daughter lives in San Francisco, or outside of San Francisco. Catching a ferry from downtown San Francisco to Tiburon, which is on the other side of the bay, boy, it's just beautiful. You go by Alcatraz, you've got a beautiful view of the Golden Gate Bridge. And I think, what is it, $5 to do something like that. So simpler things like ferry rides. Another thing, at fancier restaurants, at more expensive restaurants, during the week, my wife and I will just go out for dessert. We don't need the whole meal and everything else. It's just a nice way to spend an hour together, 45 minutes together, have a good conversation, reconnect, be at a place with nice ambiance, leave a nice tip. But we don't need 2 meals and the 3-hour experience. We're happy with just dessert. So that's another thing that we've done. And with our couple friends, and our couple friends are always like, I didn't know you could do that. Really? You can come in just for dessert? Sometimes you might want to call if you think the restaurant's busy, but if the restaurant's not busy, they're happy to do that. Another simple pleasure, my youngest daughter really likes painting pottery. The problem is we don't want to have a lot of pottery around the house, but we'll go, and oftentimes families will go and do something like that and they kind of rush through it. It's a great conversation time for my youngest daughter and I. So we'll go and paint pottery, or more precisely, she paints pottery, and I talk to her while she's doing it. So it's these simple pleasures. Okay, I've got some other ones that are going to move the needle more than what I've talked about so far. If you're enjoying the video so far, give me a like, as the kids say, thumbs for likes and subs for love. And think about leaving me a comment. I love reading the comments. Okay, let's keep going. Another one is monthly subscriptions. I think we're all guilty of this, right? How many monthly subscriptions do we have? Now, in my family's case, we're pretty generous with the monthly subscriptions. Like, we have a Netflix subscription, and we have a Hulu subscription. And as long as we're watching it, that's great. I'm happy to, it's not that much money. It's $5 or $10 a month for those. But what we don't do is sign up where you can have 3 or 4 users simultaneously. As parents, we always want our kids talking to each other. And I think the most common reason that my daughters call each other to chit chat is one of them saying, hey, how much longer are you going to be on Hulu? Because there's a show I want to watch. So we only sign up for one member, and that forces us to communicate more than maybe what we would otherwise. What else here? Spotify, we used to subscribe to that, but Pandora is kind of like using AOL for your email. A lot of young kids are like, what's Pandora? But you know what? For me, Pandora is almost as good as Spotify, probably pretty darn close. So my wife and I don't have Spotify. My oldest daughter pays for her own Spotify. She's about to lose that student discount, so we'll see if she keeps doing that. Let's see, Apple TV. We don't subscribe anymore to Apple TV. We found we just weren't watching it, so we canceled it. And the other thing is, there's some apps. My wife has a hiking app. My wife loves to walk. And that app is $50 a year. But you know what? My wife gets so much joy from using that app that, that's money well spent. So we keep doing that. So we keep track of our monthly subscriptions. The ones that are bringing joy in our life, we keep. The other ones we get rid of. The last thing I'll share on the whole streaming service, the Netflix, the Hulu thing, is we have a small television in our house. I think it's a flat screen, but it's 32 or 34 inches. And friends come over, and sometimes they'll kid with us, is like, oh my goodness, I haven't seen a small TV like this in a number of years. But what I ask them is, do you ever find yourself at the end of the year thinking, boy, I really wish I'd watched more television this year? Or it's December and you're thinking about your goals for the coming year. I don't think any of us has ever said, I want to watch more television. So frankly, a smaller television makes it a little less convenient, and we're more likely to be going outside. Okay, a couple more things that I think is helpful. When we sold our house, I was shocked at how much clothes that I had. I mean, I had a ton of clothes, and I would have never said that I had a ton of clothes, but you know, I had a closet full of clothes. We had clothes in storage. We had clothes coming out of the wazoo. And now, for myself, you know, I have five or seven pairs of slacks, a couple for work, you know, a couple for casual, a couple for super casual, probably have a dozen shirts, maybe 15, where before it was probably, I hate to say it, but probably 100. So after going through that experience and collecting all my clothes and saying, oh my goodness, I still have all of these clothes, I'm much less likely to buy a ton of clothes. So, and you know, that saves us money as well. One that I've talked about on my channel a lot is new cars. My wife and I don't buy new cars. This is, you know, if cars are your thing, you do you. But the average American spends $900 a month on transportation. Now that includes your car payments, insurance, gasoline, stuff like that. But, you know, I think for a lot of us, we could buy a used car that's 3 or 4 years old, super nice, and maybe save $300-400 a month, which can, you know, quickly become $5,000, particularly if you're looking at $5,000 a year, if you're looking at 2 cars in the family. And think about what an extra $5,000 saved or more could do for you and your family. So that's another one, is the whole car thing. Again, this is not prescriptive. Sorry, I just dropped my notes. This is not prescriptive. You do you. Okay. And then the one that I think is going to save you the most money, and I should have mentioned it earlier, so thanks. You get this reward for sticking around. The thing that's going to save you the most money is avoiding making bad investments. You know, you're watching a TV show and somebody says, you know, this is a great company, you should invest in this company. And they're really smart and articulate, and you think, yeah, I'm going to do that. You know what? That can cost you thousands of dollars or tens of thousands of dollars. Don't do that. If you're going to invest in individual companies, do your research. Know that, you know, it's probably at least 5 hours a week, I think, if you're going to own an individual company, probably more. You know, I work as a fee-only financial advisor. We have an investment team, and they're putting, you know, this is what they do. They eat, breathe, and sleep researching stocks. So really easy to lose a lot of money very quickly if you don't have time to do the research. And I think most of us don't have time to do the research. So if you like this video, I know you're going to like this video up here where I talk about why I'm frugal. It's kind of a part 2 to this. And then this video over here is one of my most popular videos. It's 5 reasons to retire as soon as you can. Thanks for watching. I'm Azul. Bye-bye.